We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. I am thrilled to have with me my friend Sara Simon today. Sara is a cross-cultural transition coach. She's a global worker, and she is the founder and director of The Way Between. And I know Sara because she was my transition coach when in 2021, Danny and I realized we had accidentally moved to the US. That is a whole nother story. And Sara and I now have had the opportunity to do some work together. We're both in the mission space, and she has become a friend. And I'm just very happy that you're here with us today, Sara.
Thanks for having me. It has been fun to journey with you. And I can't believe it's been so short that I've known you because you're so likable and enjoyable. And it feels like I've known you for a long time as a fellow Minnesotan.
I feel the same way. And how fun that we now get to do work together in the mission space. So I love this.
Yes.
And even though you are from Minnesota, you are now in the beautiful city of Denver, Colorado. And
Yes, we are in
before
Colorado.
that, you guys were in Spain.
Yeah, we were 8 years in Spain, living and working cross culturally and working on a member care team there. So now we are stateside, came back for parent care and for reasons helping our kids enter into middle school and also to launch The Way Between and do more of the work that we do here. So,
And it's so great that you and Jeff do work with transitions because I feel like the entire world went through a transition with the pandemic. I mean, so this is a topic that's on everybody's mind. But then you guys
yeah.
specifically had the experience of making cross-cultural moves, of transitioning families from one continent to another continent. And then you had transitions that you went through while you were in Spain as well. So that's what we are leaning into in this episode. If you have not figured it out already, we're talking about transition. We're going to talk about how to lean into it well, because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. So, how do we do it well? And then, truly, how to take
hmm
care of ourselves in that transition.
hmm
So, Sarah, I want to hear just a little bit about your journey. How did you and Jeff decide that you wanted to coach and teach around the area of transition? How did you form the
hmm
way between?
Gosh, it's a much longer conversation than we have time for right now. But in summary, we had worked with people in transitions for about 15 years and we lived our own transitions. He out of Korea and me out of England. And I'd done some work in Italy and Germany too. And if you have moved cross culturally, you know it can be bumpy and the reentry can be really bumpy. And like many people in member care, we serve out of the place that we were lacking. And God has used it in a very redemptive way. So we decided to form The Way Between, specifically for major life transitions, because we kept seeing that that was an area of care that was lacking. And not just care, but care and development. Like we were really noticing that it's a key leadership development time and that God can really ignite some amazing creative potential in people for them to see the way that He has uniquely wired them. And so we really love working with people in the between. That's the name of the organization, The Way Between, both the way being God and the way helping people guide the way. Um, and so helping them find a way forward and it being really life giving and not something to dread or to hate or to feel completely lost in. And that's what we were seeing, people depressed, burned out, identity crisis, team conflict, lack of passion. Um, and so we were like, it doesn't have to be all those things. It can also be this really beautiful creative space and good and it can be in community. And so, yeah, there's a lot to say about all of that, but it's been really enjoyable working in that space, especially now as The Way Between, just in that space. So,
Well, and like you said, I think people have dramatically different experiences of transition. And when we do it poorly, oh man, can it derail us? But when we do it well, it's a game changer. What are some of the ways that you see missionaries doing transition poorly And this isn't to,
Mm,
like, make anyone feel bad.
yeah.
A lot of people just don't have the tools or know how to do it.
Yes, yes. And that's actually a super great point, Stephanie. I think that not doing it with others is probably the biggest mistake, or not asking for help. And I think we often think we have to figure it out on our own, or that nobody else can understand it, which is why we exist as a third party provider. We're like, no, you're not alone. There are people that do this all the time. Like, we created a whole life and career around it. And so there is a huge need for it, because we feel like we are alone and we don't know what resources are available, or that it would be common to experience the feelings that you're feeling. So we just encourage people to find support in it, and to ask for support, to find the tools, and that's much of what we are really passionate about as well.
And it's so key what you're saying about normalizing it. I remember the first time we met was at a missions conference, and Danny and I were there. You were doing a workshop on transitions, and we were looking at the different workshops thinking, where do we go? And that one jumped off the page because we're straight up in full on transition. We went, I think about a week after we had looked at each other and went, I think maybe we live here now. Did we move here? Just thinking we were coming up for a few months and surprise. So we stumbled into that workshop, and I'm pretty sure I asked more questions than anyone else in that circle. But it was really nice hearing other people share too, and hearing it was a panel discussion. So there were several of you
Right.
and Marcus and someone from Barnabas, just talking about how normal it was and talking about how
Yes.
long it takes and
Yes.
hearing other people's experience. And I felt so relieved even just hearing other people's stories. I mean, that was before we even got to any tools or ideas of things to do. So that community piece is just really, really helpful. And I love
Yes.
then the workshop that I did with you, the transition
Hmm.
seminar, because same thing. We were with people every single week and
Yep.
kind of like laughing together and crying together. Man, it makes a
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that's why we do it too, and why we continue to craft it around community, as much as possible, because it can feel so isolating and so lonely. And we all know it's really unique to move overseas. It's really unique to come back from overseas. People don't know what questions to ask, right? They don't know what your experiences have been. You might be put on a pedestal. They don't know exactly how to relate to you. And so, in a lot of ways, we get to, not just as the way between, but as global workers, we get to teach people how to interact with us. We get to, like, invite them to come along. And so if we have the support that we need, we can invite them in a better space as well.
That is very true. And what would you say are some common reactions that people have to transition or in transition?
Mm. I think they feel stuck. I think that they are afraid that they might not ever get through it. Uh, um, and that they will maybe collapse into a puddle of whatever, and not be able to get through it or move through it, to get to the other side of whatever God is for them next. The common reaction being then, I don't know how to get from point A to point B. Like, how do I move through this? How do I actually continue moving? If you are feeling all of those feelings, which we want to fully embrace, the sadness and the grief and the loss, of leaving behind a whole life, which is huge. And most people need that validation of what you just did is really, really big, and it's okay. Where you're at is okay.
And with missionaries and global workers, as you said, if we try and tell our stories to people who don't understand or who maybe don't have the grace to, there are some people who they might not understand, but they do really lean in and listen.
Hmm.
But when we try and explain it to them, we can feel lonely, like you said, because they don't know what to say and they say odd things. So when you can get with somebody who gets it, I do think it makes a huge difference. And people just
Hmm.
want us to be happy and they don't know what to do. I think
Hmm.
as a society, we don't know quite what to do with grief. And
Hmm.
that was one of the most valuable things for me, I think, in the transition seminar. We talked about lamenting in the right
Hmm.
way and grieving and writing psalms of lament and being sad. And as someone who does not like being sad, I really don't like being sad. It was important that somebody drew me into that space. I think
Mhm.
I was afraid to go there because I thought I might get stuck and not be able to get out. But if you're not sad for a little bit first, then you
Yeah.
will be stuck
Yeah.
forever.
Yes. Stuck in a place of melancholy or indifference, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to sadness. And the sadness then opened up this whole sphere. And this was one of my learnings early on after coming back from England. I went to a counselor and she said, "Have you ever thought about grief as good? Like, have you ever opened up to the idea of these emotions were all given to you for a reason? Like, all of these could be just neutral, like words." And I was like, "Oh, no, they're not. Sadness is bad. Like grief is bad." And and even just recently, a spiritual director asking me, "Good grief, talk to me about good grief." And I was like, "Yes, there is such a thing as good grief." And it really opens you up to all of the spectrum of emotions and the excitement in life and the joy in life, and seeing them as, gosh, this is just an array. This is just a buffet of emotions that we get to choose from. And what if they are neutral and we just get to dip into them and try them on and experience them? And yet we have to, at the same time, really live into them and walk through them. We say, get the grief out in some way, get the sadness through your body, out of your body, or it's going to find its way out. And that might not always be good. So if you get to dance it out, shout it out, laugh it out, color it out, draw it out, hike it out, whatever it is. If you choose it, you can have some agency in it a little bit more. Um, and tears might be one option, but they might not be. Like just allowing your body to really get the grief and the sadness out is, I think, a really valuable and healthy way to approach transition.
So it sounds like one of the things that you're saying is identifying the emotions that you're feeling and then looking for a way to express those in an intentional and healthy way rather than just
Yes.
finding yourselves caught up in cycles of who knows what.
Yes. Yeah. And not judging yourself for having those feelings. I think that's what I'm kind of getting at is it's okay, right? Like it's okay. Like you said, I didn't want to be sad. I don't want to be sad. Like I only think of sadness as bad. It's okay. That's a normal emotion. We were given all of these emotions. So intentional is an important part of it too, where we do engage in it and we create space for it. When we do the workshops, we have a cohort quarterly. So when we do the workshops, we try to validate and normalize that, like we were talking about earlier. But at the same time, we can contain it too. We can be a container. People are like, I feel like I might fall apart if I do that over here. And then we say, well, you can do that here. Like this is safe. And at least for these 2 hours, like come on over and do it here if you need to. Let it be a container if that's helpful for you.
Okay, and so you just said right now, like looking for some ways to express that, whether it's in community, like in a transition seminar, or in a small group, or with friends. You talked about dancing and some physical things. What are some other ways that people can get in touch with what they're feeling to help them move forward?
Mhm. Yeah, I think having people that are in your life that reflect it back. It seems like, we do this better with children now, I think, than when I was growing up. We say to our kids, it seems like you're really sad, or it looks like you have a lot of emotion around that. We use the line with our kids, do you just need a hug? Because sometimes all you really need is a hug, but having somebody reflect it back can be really beneficial, right? Like somebody to notice you or to see you or to say, you don't seem yourself, right? I think the reflection back, um, finding spaces that are safe, people that are safe who've gone down this road before you, and being a good listening ear for you. Like we were also talking, not everybody gets it. People might just say, "Oh, just suck it up. You just moved." Like people said to me, I've moved a lot. Like you just moved." And I'm like, "I left my whole life. I lived my whole life during a pandemic and nobody seemed to notice." Like, so and that's okay. Like we are flexible, adaptable people and as global workers, we've done this before. We actually had a lot to offer in the pandemic because we've done it before. But having people that got us in that space, that really understood it, other people who did the same thing, that was huge for us. And that's what we saw with other workers too. that the resonance was really important.
So if they don't have people like that in their lives currently, it's finding them, whether it's reaching out to you guys, whether it's reaching out and getting some counseling, but it's not using it as an excuse. It is finding people who have the capacity to listen and not
Absolutely.
choosing people who don't and then getting mad that they can't. That's the one I see
Right.
too. Like, I tried to tell my friend, but she's a terrible friend because she can't listen to me and she
Right.
doesn't understand. And your poor friend's like, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't mean they're a bad friend, they don't know, and you can't know what you don't know.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think the debriefing element, especially if you're coming back from being in an overseas context to your home country, having a debrief is really, really important to integrate your experience. And then to have that listening space, even just for that time, to be able to, there's qualified professionals, train alongside link care. There's all kinds of great debriefing opportunities that people can go through that will help them learn how to talk about it, even right, to be able to then come back to
Yes.
people and say that this was really hard because, or this is what life looked like. I was really amazed. We went through a Barnabas debriefing, and our kids got language that I didn't know how to give them, and they still talk about things, that I think are really amazing, that they were given language that was developmentally appropriate for them. That we do this, right? We do this as a full-time job, and yet we don't work with kids necessarily. So having those spaces for the different ages and developmentally appropriate times is really, really great as well.
Yeah, it's good that you brought up kids too, because you're right, our kids go through transitions as well, and our daughter also did a Barnabas debrief for high school seniors going into college, and it was life-changing for her. It was absolutely huge. So I think there are more resources out there than we realize. I had no idea until recently just all there is out there in terms of, stuff while you're on the field and then stuff if God calls you back. I know the majority of the people who are listening right now are currently global workers or
Mhm.
missionaries. So I want to tap into a little bit of your guys' story. What would be an example of a transition that you guys went through while you were living in Spain? And what are some ways that you feel like you guys did well? What are some ways you crashed and burned? What did you learn
Mm.
from?
Oh, man. I need more coffee in my coffee mug to talk about this a longer time too. A transition we experienced when we were in Spain. Well, I had children in Spain. That was a transition. I switched roles within the time that we were there. 8 years. I was there, kind of doing debriefing and mid career assessments and different things like that. But then we also were hosting in our home, and we were learning language and acculturating and all of those things. So we learned the hard way through me burning out and having adrenal fatigue and adrenal burnout, that I couldn't wear all of those hats. Like, it was way too many to raise kids, learn the language, etc. What one or two things was I really good at that Sarah was uniquely brought into this world to do, right? And what were things that other people weren't doing, or things that they were doing that they could keep doing that I was trying to do? Just where were the overlaps? And so we had really intentional coaches in our life during that time that were not affiliated with what our team, and those people spoke very honestly and candidly into our life. And for me, that meant leaving the team that I was on with too many hats that I was wearing. And that was a huge transition for me because I then stayed in Spain while not working in the same organization. And uh, do I, you asked, did I do it well? Did it go, what crashed and burned? I think it was all of that. Like,
What parts do you feel like you did well that you're like, "All right, I leaned into this well," and what are some things that you're like, "You know what? I learned from that, and I don't know that I would do it that way again next time."
yeah, gosh. I think that asking for outside help was one of the things that I did well. And I sort of created a team of people, like a spiritual director, a therapist, and a coach, which may be overkill. You might only need one of those. But for me, I needed the voices, the different angles, and especially for the discernment because it was such a big deal to change vocation while staying on the field. Uh, I think that when there was no choice around it because my body was saying you can't keep going. Like I had to make that decision. Um, what did I not do well? Well, let me go back to I think I kept showing up in the community space. I think that that was something that God really prompted me. Just keep showing up, even though this is really hard, and keep showing up to do your work. That was one of the pieces that was really challenging, right? To keep kind of putting the mirror up and asking these people in my life to be really honest with me and say, gosh, how's it going? Should I do something else? Like what's different? I think looking back, I think I wish I would have spent more time with my kids in those spaces. We didn't fully let them into some of those places, and they were young. So I think I would have wanted more guidance on how to bring a 3 and a 7-year-old through that because me leaving a team affected them. That was their community and their family, which I think we're still starting to learn. We're still continuing to learn what impact that had on them. And so I think asking for more TCK care in those moments, asking them to help us give language to those ages. 3 is different than 7, different than 10, like all of those different ages, so different. So yeah, I think that's one of the things I think I would have done differently.
Yeah, well, and it's true that our kids are going through transitions right alongside us, and we can't always be the rock that we wish we could to help them
Mhm.
process things through because we're going through so many emotions. So it is,
Right.
it's kind of two-sided. You're going, Lord, help me be strong for them, um,
Right.
but not act like I'm invincible. It's okay if they see a little bit of our struggles as well and realize that we're
Yeah.
all grieving together. I mean, if we are transitioning out of a church community or a work community or a space where they're seeing the same friends and the same people, and all of a sudden they aren't there, they can feel angry with us. Like, why did you take me out of this space? Not
Mhm.
understanding the deeper reasons behind it. So allowing them to feel a little angry and frustrated. And I like what you said
Mhm.
about outside people too. So I was with you. I had in many of the transitions we went through, living on the ground in Peru, I had a coach, and oh my goodness, I cannot tell you how valuable that was for me to be able to
Right.
process it through with somebody outside the situation, but who could understand because
Yep.
she had worked in mission spaces. So she knew missions. So then it got to the point where she got to know our family, and she said, "Would you ever want me to talk to Macy, to your daughter Macy?" And I said, "Macy, what do you think?" And she was like, "Yes." And so
Aw.
she was so kind. She really met with each of our family members, and it made such a difference for us. And there are things our kids can say to an outside person that they can't say to us because they need to be able to say if they're angry with us or they're frustrated with us or they're
Mhm.
sad. And we
Mhm.
can't feel mad at them that they're feeling those things because we feel the same things.
Right.
How can we
Mhm.
expect more from them than we are
Right.
even able to do?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that makes me think too, one of the things that we were really intentional about was marriage, input and therapy. Um, and I think you and I talked about this just a tad bit at another time, but that space was so vital to have a safe outsider to really be honest with and how hard it was to go through as a couple and to have differing opinions. It was like we were watching 2 different movies a lot of the time, and so a third party in that space just felt so validating and really beneficial for us and, was a bit of glue for us in very sticky, hard times, and so that I just really, really recommend that as well, just the safe outside spaces where you need them. You might not need all of those and definitely not all at the same time, but finding people and like you said, there are more resources available now than ever, so finding the people. Reach out to us. We can, forward on to people that we know, the resources that we know. You all have a lot of resources as well. I just think people not having access to those and not going it alone, and feeling like they don't exist. They do exist more now than ever. So
They do, and we are not nearly as alone as we think. And I know when we surveyed the modern day missionaries, in terms of some of the things they're feeling and experiencing, loneliness came out as one of the very top things. So there is this sense of I'm alone, but when you realize there's a community of people out there, there are tens of thousands of people who are also, and more than that, who have served, are serving global workers and missionaries. There's a lot more resources than we realize. And for us, it's just going, okay, I'm going to find something. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to ask and I'm going to ask until I find. So that's part of what we're trying to do at Modern Day is really connect people with resources. I know when I met you, Sarah, I was like, this is a game changer for me. So that's even part of why I have you on today and why we have guests every single week. Our heart is that missionaries don't find out about these resources later, that they find out about them now, that they prioritize them in their budget, in their time, that they talk to whoever they
yeah,
need to talk to.
that's
Maybe it's reaching out to a supporter and saying, a supporter who really gets you and knows you and saying, "Hey, this is something we need in our lives right now. Is this something that you would be willing to sponsor us in or your
mhm,
sending organization?" There's
mhm,
more than we there's more we can do, I think, than we think we can. But
yeah,
you hit on really important things today. The individual piece, for couples who are married, the marriage piece, the kid piece, transitions in and out of a country, transitions within a country. As we wrap it up, what would be just a few things that a listener who is in transition and is really paying attention right now that can implement right now? They could do right now.
mm. Yeah, I think 2 things come to mind. Uh, if you're sensing a transition is about to happen or going to happen, leaning into it and being open to it, just creating that space of openness in your own life, maybe even beginning to pray into that space and asking God, okay, so I'm feeling a nudge. I'm sensing that there's something about to change. We say what got you here won't get you there. Like, there's an element of there's change that's always happening in our life. And it's okay. And it's okay to be in process. It's okay to be in development. And being open to that and the amazing things that can come from it. Um, I think that that's one element that I'm thinking about as we wrap up. But I think grace for yourselves, that it can be clumsy, it can be painful, it can be sad, it can be all of those emotions, and grace to reach out. It does take humility. It's a vulnerable space, and grace for your family as we're talking about marriage and kids. Everybody's going to experience it at different times, right? Like we're not all feeling the same feels at the same time. And so just extending the grace, and the full spectrum of, what might come from that, being open to it and extending grace. Those are my 2 thoughts as we kind of wrap this up.
Yeah, and that's so good about the proactive piece and then the piece when you're already in it, or the reactive piece. The proactive piece, if you're sensing something's coming, and for anyone who's wondering, is a transition coming up in life? Yes, it is because they always are. They're
Right,
constantly
exactly. Yep.
because even if you're stable in one area, let's say you're stable in your relationship, well, something might change in your work, something might change with your kids, something might change in what God's calling you to do in your ministry, in a relationship. I mean, we walk through transitions all the time. I know there's a book that I read. It's not a Christian book, it's a secular book, but it's called Life is in the Transitions by Bruce Feiler.
Mhm.
And it was outstanding. If you do read it, there is some colorful language and interesting examples in there. But if that does not bother you, it is incredibly worth the read. But it was really helpful. I read it, Sarah, when I was meeting with you guys in the transition seminar, and it tied together so perfectly because it was the normalization. Transitions are coming. They're coming. They're coming. Let's stop being surprised. It reminded me of when I used to play sports back in high school, and middle school. I played basketball for maybe like 2 years or 1 year. I was terrible. It was not the sport for me, but I was good at defense. I was small and I could get in cracks. And I remember just learning the stance that you learn in basketball or in volleyball when you get down in that squatting position because you know someone's coming. And it's not a place of fear, like, "Oh my gosh, no, what's gonna happen?" No,
Right.
they're coming. The people are
Yep.
coming down the court, and so I'm gonna get in position so that I don't get knocked down when they
Yep.
come, and I think that's us with transitions or
Yep.
hardship or anything in life. It's getting in position and going, "All right, it's coming." Not it's but it's
Yeah.
coming.
Not hide under the rock, it's coming. but
Exactly.
equip yourself with the tools that you need and the knowledge that you need to be available to be in that space.
Yes. Okay. Any other than resources or equipping of knowledge, any other resources or things that you would recommend to people to dig into to prepare for their next transition?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great resources. Reach out to us if you want any of them. I think a couple off the top of my head, Stuck, Navigating Life's Transition by Terry Walling is pretty key to think about it developmentally. The Way of Transition by William Bridges is another sort of basal text
Oh,
along
yeah.
the lines of what you're talking about. Um, we're creating transition material all the time ourselves. So you can kind of check out our get on our email newsletter list, and there's lots of different tools that we offer that way. We have the Art of Transition workbook that we work with people with now. Um, but there's so many depending on what part of the transition that you're into. There's different resources we would recommend depending on what part or what
Mhm.
phase of the transition you're in, or if you're on a sabbatical, for example. So feel free. People can reach out to us if they want to ask specifics or
You guys have some great articles on your blog as well, where you've touched on different aspects
thanks.
of transition that I think are very much worth reading.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot out there. Those are the two that come to my mind right now. So
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak into this. I know today was really applicable for a lot of people because, again, transitions are coming. What are we going to do about it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you for offering this to people because it's really, really necessary and beneficial. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And so for everyone, we'll be posting in the show notes links to resources, links to the way between, so you can find out more about what Sarah was talking about today, more about their organization. And we just want to thank you for joining us today. So make sure to hit subscribe, leave us a review, continue to share the podcast, and send any questions you have on this to care@modernday.org. And we will see you on our next episode.